My name's Mike Malnick, and I'm the host of the Level Up Leadership Show. Thank you so much for watching today. It's really just my heart to help you grow as a leader. I know that I'm reading books, listening to podcasts, doing everything that I can to glean as much information to help me grow as a leader. So what my heart is just really to pass along leadership principles to you that I've learned throughout my lifetime. So help me out and let me know, what are you struggling with as a leader? What topics that maybe I haven't done that you've been wondering about. I'm not saying I have all the answers, but if, you say a topic that, I might have some, experience in it, then I'll go ahead and do a show on that topic. Go ahead, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, like us on Facebook. All right, here we go, our next episode. We're here for our second part of our leading our kids. And we've been talking the past few episodes of really how do we lead within the context of our family. Susie is here joining me once again, and we're going to kind of go into almost a part two of how do we lead our kids. And I'm so excited to not only have my wife Susie here, but we have Brandy Elrod here with us. How you doing, Brandy?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Good. And I, for the Level Up Leadership Show, I talk a lot about leadership principles in the workplace. How do you lead? How do you be a part of a team? But Brandy, you have your own show on parenting, right?
Yes, we're Consider It All Joy, and I've been going through a book called Parenting by Paul David Tripp. So every week is just kind of a new chapter to focus on in how to best lead our families. So
that's awesome.
It's going well.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, ladies, for being here and joining me. It's fun to have more than just me here.
Yeah.
So we want to talk about this idea of leading our kids, and Susie and I, the last episode, talked about money. We talked about careers a little bit and just how to help our kids, really set our kids up for success. And so those things are important, but I feel like we're actually going to hit maybe even the more important aspects of leading our kids today. And so we want to, right out of the gate, talk about discipline. Disciplining your kids. And if you have kids, and definitely if you have more than one, you're going to really know that there's not a blanket solution for discipline, that every child needs to be disciplined different just because they're different kids. What do you think?
Right, exactly, yes. Totally tailored to each individual child's personality, I think. Mm-hmm.
So we each have 3 kids.
Yes.
You have 3, I have 3. And our oldest daughter has always required a very firm hand when it comes to discipline. And we were very intentional in the way we disciplined her from the time she was little. And we even had a certain phrase that we used when she was acting out that accompanied the punishment. So then when we were in public, we could just say that phrase and she would often correct her behavior.
Perfect.
But then our second daughter, if you say her name firmly, she's a puddle of tears and crying. And so the discipline she requires is much different. What is your experience
I definitely feel like it's a similar situation. Okay. I think it has to do with that whole firstborn, middle child. It's not just across the board, but it seems to fall into place perfectly with birth order. But yeah, our middle child is definitely our more sensitive one. And we just started off out the gate strict and, kind of disciplinarian. So that was the standard. Mm-hmm. But plus he was also our most compliant child. So he didn't take as much, whereas our first child was very stubborn.
Yeah, so interesting.
Yeah.
So one of the things that's always been important to me, and you and I even disagree a little bit about the way we handle this. But we both agree on the fact that our relationship with our kids is the most important thing. Right. And that has to stay intact when we're disciplining. Right. And so even through the discipline process, we absolutely want our kids to know that we love them. We are on their side.
Right.
We never want a broken relationship between us and them.
Yeah.
And so how do we do that? How do we discipline in a way that gets the message across, but we're still maintaining that relationship with our kids?
I think one of the biggest things I've learned as a parent is kind of two-sided. Like, one would be the consistency of like how you deal with certain negative behaviors or disobedience or things like that. Is having not that I'm always perfect with this, definitely a struggle, but it's so important. And then the other one that is such a huge thing to me that I try to focus on is not being emotionally reactionary when you're disciplining your kids. But that helps when you have a consistent layout for how you respond to certain misbehaviors, and then you have that default to go to, that you're not reacting out of your anger or frustration. You have your consequences to fall back on. Right. So it's not always easy to implicate, but
and that's hard, not to react emotionally.
Yes.
And I'll tell you right now, I'm awful at that.
I am too.
I'm like, you did what? Like I'm like, ooh.
Yeah.
And so it's hard, but I love that, consistent with the same, punishment or the same consequence of, hey, this is, you do this, you're going to consequence. Right. And because kids will try to wear you out. Well, if I do it enough, then maybe mom or dad won't on the 5th time around.
Exactly.
No, the 5th, the 10th, the 20th, you're still going to get that consequence. And for me, parenting, I remember, thinking in my head at a young age, people, as a general rule, they're like, oh, teenagers are, and it's just, you talk to, parents with teenagers, and it's just like, oh my goodness. And I didn't want that for our kids. Yeah. So my thought was, I'm going to be really hard on you when you are 4 to 10, because through that 4, if I can kind of, I want to set myself up to enjoy, those, 10 to 18. Then if I'm really hard and I don't want to say strict, but like you're not going to get away with a lot. Like those are really formative years from that age 4 through 10. And if I can really mold and shape you into who I want you to be when you're 12 and 13, then those years will be more enjoyable. Yeah.
We're only in the beginning of teenage years. Our oldest is 13. But
so I don't know if it worked yet.
I have a friend who I recently saw her post something about this, and she has 3 kids, and they're all upper high school or older. And she was just addressing this misconception that the teen years are the worst years or the hardest years. Yeah. And she was proposing that your teenager can be a joy. Yeah. They can bring delight to you and to your family. And that's really our hope. And I mean, again, we're still at the beginning, but our oldest, she's amazing. Yeah. She amazes me every single day by the things she does and the way she can control herself and have her own self-discipline with her emotions, which is something you often don't hear with teenagers.
Right. Especially teenage girls.
No, especially teenage girls. But it does start when they're so young. Yeah. And I was recently on the phone with a family member, and she was in the car. We were chatting, and they had just arrived at their destination. They were going grocery shopping. It was her and her husband and her 3-year-old son. And she wanted to stay in the car and keep talking to me. So the plan was her husband was going to take the 3-year-old, and they were going to go get their grocery shopping. They just had a few things. Well, as I'm on the phone, I hear the 3-year-old start to say, "Mommy, Mommy, you come with me. You come with." And my family member was saying, "No, Daddy's going to take you." And within 1 minute, I heard her say, "Okay, I'll come with you." And I said to her, he's going to do that again. And because we are teaching them.
Right.
We're rewarding that behavior when they whine or they cry and they get what they want. Then we are, in essence, rewarding that. So it is tricky. There's a lot of, you have to be very, very intentional when they're little all the way through.
Oh, yeah.
And we definitely are not perfect.
No.
I think it's almost easier sometimes to discipline the strong-willed kid than it is the emotional kid.
Yes.
I know that's been a bit of a challenge in our house right now. Do you have any tips for the child that it doesn't take a lot, but because they're reacting so emotionally, you kind of have to be careful. And then it almost feels like you're picking them back up off the floor after.
Definitely. And I think for the extremely sensitive child, which we have our middle child, and he's pretty naturally sensitive, but our 4-year-old right now is going through this hypersensitive stage. So anytime we correct him or raise our voices in any way, he just breaks down. And I haven't figured out yet if he's figured out some way to play us or if it's genuine, because it's not typically his personality to be sensitive. But like, I think it goes back to us as parents, we have to control how we react.
Right.
And it has to be, you just learn how to read your child, I think. You have to learn the signals that are specific to your child. And if your child is going to be stressed or frustrated or overwhelmed by you raising your voice, then I feel like that's something we as parents need to work on.
Have to adapt.
You know, we have to, like, I could just full on go at my older two, you know, and they didn't really seem, you know, I tried to, you know, self-control I didn't yell at them all the time, but they handled it better, you know, and now I'm looking at my youngest and I'm like, he's not handling it so well. So you could kind of rethink, again, going back to every child is different.
Yes.
And yeah, just being sensitive. I mean, would you want to be talked to like that? A lot of times we don't think about that. Like you wouldn't talk to another person like that when you were correcting them. So why would you talk to your child that way? And that's not always something that's easy to remember when you're emotional, but you know.
Yeah. Well, we want to move on into another really big aspect of kids and growing up, and is their relationships. You know, we have a relationship with our kids, but how do we set our kids up to have good relationships, friendships, you know, later on, you know, eventually at some point enter into dating and, you know, eventually marriage. So how do we set our kids up, you know, because they're going to have relationships with jobs and coworkers and friends, and how do we set them up for success with their relationships in life?
What do you think, Brandy?
That's difficult. Navigating your own relationships is difficult, and you have to try to help your children navigate theirs, and it can become extremely challenging. And my eldest, she will be 13. She's 12 now, and she went through a really rough patch in the last couple years where it just seemed like she had, you know, one good friend, but didn't get to spend that much time with them. But everyone else around her seemed to be a negative environment and very almost bullying, you know. And that's such a hard thing to watch your child go through and help them navigate and teach them. I always try to teach kindness, and I try to teach, because of my faith, the biblical principles of, you know, putting others before yourself. And just because they are stooping to that level does not mean that you get to react to that at the same level, and just helping them, but also trying to comfort them when they're hurting. It's really hard to navigate and keep a balance there of teaching them how to respond in relationships, but also taking care of themselves. And I think just teaching her to really lean in on God when she was really struggling with that, and also she really spent a lot of time praying for God to send her the friend that she needed, you know. And us as parents, it's our responsibility also to pray for the relationships that are going to be beneficial to our children.
And sometimes we have to put them in situations that it's easier for them to hang out with friends that are more beneficial for them to be around, and make it difficult for them to be with the kids that maybe aren't walking on the same track that you want them to be on. And I know I see a difference with our oldest daughter, of course, based on who she's hanging out with. But one great example I have is actually with your daughter. I see when our two girls are hanging out, they're very inclusive with the other younger kids. They make them feel more comfortable. There aren't fights. But there are other kids that my oldest might be hanging out with that if she's having a sleepover with them, they're mean, you know, like the younger siblings get treated in a mean way and are made to feel bad and are excluded. And that is insightful for me to watch as a parent to
Yes.
see who does my child become when they're hanging out with this other person.
Yes.
And would you just share what your parents kind of taught you in the way they handled your relationship with friends and how we've kind of adapted that for our kids?
Yeah, and I was like a chameleon, you know, and I think a lot of people are to a certain degree, but
because everybody wants to fit in.
Right. So I acted one way when I was with, you know, the guys that I, you know, played hockey with, and you know, in certain way, you know, when I was with my friends from my youth group. And it's not like I was two different people, but, you know, when you're with a bunch of guys that are doing, you know, crazy things, you go along, and that's, you know, just part of being, you know, a teenager or even a younger kid. And so my parents decided, you know, hey, we'll let you go off with your, you know, your hockey friends, but they would never let me spend a whole weekend with them.
Right.
So it was never like you're not with them, you know, apart from being on the ice and playing, you know, you're not just going to go to one of their houses and hang out with them, you know, for 3 or 4 days straight. Because they say, we know what kind of kid you'll be when you come home. And so, but it's not like they would say never.
Right.
But my parents just didn't want them to be my best friends. Because, you know, I say this all the time, you know, show me your friends, I'll show you your future. You know, who your friends are is where you will be. You will end up being like that. And so my parents decided, hey, that's not, you know, the decisions that they make, kinds of people, you know, it's just, we want Mike to, you know, go to church, serve God, love Jesus. And so that's who we need him to be around. And so we've kind of really implemented that into our parenting style of, you know, hey, we want, you know, our girls to, you know, have good, strong friends that have good morals and influences that kind of align with, you know, our belief system. So, you know, but, and I said this the last episode, but we are the best example for our kids. And so I think how we interact with our friends really goes a long way in teaching, you know, our kids, you know, how we argue, you and I, is going to set our kids up with how they argue one day with their spouses. How
we love each other too.
Yes.
So I think showing, you know, physical affection, like we'll kiss in front of the kids or hug in front of the kids, and it's so funny because our one daughter, if we're ever hugging, she comes right in and just inserts herself
right in the middle.
Of it. And so it's important for them to see that because you know they're going to see you argue, right? Like it's just part of life. It's part. We always have conflict. You know they're going to see that part of it. So let's make sure they also see the positive side as well.
And too, and it's not always possible, but to see you resolve the conflict, you know, excuse me, not just see you argue. I think that's healthy to a certain degree, but also that they see you resolve the conflict and what that looks like, because you're teaching them by your actions. You might not care about what they think. You're just mad at your spouse right now, but you're teaching them, modeling. This is how we argue. This is also how we resolve conflict. This is how, you know, we love each other. And you know, and one of my things I really want to help our kids set them up is, you know, with their friendships. And so, you know, I remember early on, especially with Addie and even now, you know, Ivy, hey, this is how, when you have someone over, you have a friend over, this is what you do. This is, you know,
this is how you treat them.
This is how you treat them. This is, you know, you're not going to necessarily get to do everything that you want to do. And have you had any kind of conversations like that?
Oh yeah, definitely. Just trying to teach them the basics of putting yourself last and putting your guest first. You know, if there's one of this, you're gonna offer it to your guest first. And even with the sibling thing, our kids are great, especially with when their daughter comes over, to include the younger ones, but also teaching my younger ones, this is their time with their friends. So you need to go and do your own thing to give them space, you know, just all of how that works, to just be selfless people and to, you know, learn how to put others before yourself.
Part of modeling conflict resolution comes with when we have conflict with our children.
Yeah.
And, you know, we've talked about not getting overly emotional when you're disciplining, but there are many times that I've failed at that. And there are many times that I've gone to my kids after and apologized and said, hey, I shouldn't have reacted that way.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Will you forgive me?
Yes.
And that's an important part, too, that we're not just modeling with our spouse or with our own friend, but with them.
Right.
And, you know, I really value when my kids are quick to forgive and will say, yes, I forgive you, Mommy. And we hug it out. And that means something. It means something to me. And I know it means something to them, too.
And I think showing your children that you're just human also.
Right.
You're struggling with some of the same emotions and things that they struggle with. And how you resolve it and how you deal with it is the example to them.
That's scary for us, though,
It
isn't
is.
it?
It's really hard to be transparent with your children because your children look at you like you have it all together. But I feel like it creates a better relationship and a better bond when you can go to your kids and say, I messed up. I'm having a bad day. I'm, you know, whatever it is, and ask for their forgiveness.
Yeah.
It just creates a better relationship, I think.
And I know one of the things that we did with our oldest, that we taught her, because our youngest doesn't, or our middle child, Ivy, doesn't go a lot, but she's starting to as she gets older. Because I know I always didn't like it when you know, our girls would have friends over and they would ignore us. So we were, you know, told Addie, hey, when you go to someone's house, you know, acknowledge their parents, like talk to them, like, you know what I mean? Ask them a question, you know what I mean? Like engage somewhat with a conversation with the adults. Just don't ignore the dad or ignore the mom, and, you know, be scared, be confident, and have a conversation with that person, because it's just, I just think it's just good etiquette, you know, to be able to, and I want my kids to be able to have conversations with adults.
And it definitely, I'm sure, builds a confidence in them that I struggled with that as a child. Up until probably marriage, I was afraid to talk to adults. So it was a struggle for me to go, especially with coming from a primarily single parent where it was just me and my mom. It was very hard for me to encounter dads in my friends' homes and have a appropriate, like, normal relationship with them. I just was terrified. So I love that. I didn't even really think about that being an important thing, but it is, and I'm sure it builds such a confidence in your kids, because you can tell the kids who were not taught how to talk to adults and the ones who were.
Right. So let's now move into what, you know, we believe is probably the most important aspect of raising and leading our kids, is that of leading them into faith, and what that looks like. You know, I've been talking about, you know, I talked about faith in families a couple episodes ago, but, you know, we need to teach our kids that there is an absolute truth, you know, that there is a God who loves them, who sent his son Jesus to die for them, who wants a relationship with them. You know, but our kids, they get all of their cues from us as parents. And so how do we demonstrate that faith is so important to us and that we want it to be important in their life? How do we impart that to them?
It's really funny. I was just listening to a little blurb of a Francis Chan marriage book that him and his wife wrote together. I think it's You and Me. I'm losing the title, but the thing that stuck out to me this morning was our marriage is supposed to be a picture of Christ in our lives. And who more important to see that beautiful picture than our own children, than our own families in our homes, so that they can go out and show that to others, you know? And it's so important for us to establish, like we talked about earlier, when you have a fight or a disagreement with your spouse, don't just let them see that part. Let them see the resolution and the apology and how we show forgiveness to each other. And being that example as not only in our marriage, but our family is such an important thing to me, is showing that picture of Christ's love. Because that is our witness to everyone. And people see you're different. Your life is different. And why? Why is that?
So good.
What about you, hon? What do you think of how, share a little bit about how we've tried to impart faith into our kids?
I think that it has to just be a part of your day-to-day conversation and your day-to-day life. So, if we're just hoping that we don't have to talk about God all week long and then we can just take our kids to church and put the responsibility on their children's leader, then I think we're missing it. It has to be talking in those everyday conversations, and especially when your kids are in crisis. So it's those times when your child comes to you and says, "Mommy, I've been lying. I haven't been brushing my teeth every night." And they're just sobbing. Their little bodies are just racked with sobs because they're so devastated. And
you got that conviction.
Yes. And so you give them grace. You model for them what Christ's grace looks like. And you say, "I forgive you, honey." And you talk to them about what forgiveness means, and that it means that when I look at you, I'm not going to see the mistake that you've made or the lie you've been telling. I'm just going to see you, and that I'm not thinking about that or even remembering that. And it also means not bringing it back up, which I have done that. I say this out of experience that my kids have made mistakes and I brought them back up later, and so it's truly choosing to forget that mistake and not bringing it back up. And there are other things with having a Bible that's appropriate for them, for their age, to be able to read. Our oldest daughter, her little pages out of her kids' Bible fell out. She loved it, and she would have her favorite stories that she would read over and over again. And now as she's older, it's finding a Bible that fits for her now. We tried one Bible, we tried the Message version, we tried, and if it doesn't work, try again. It's finding ways to get the Word of God to them. But I think the day-to-day aspect of it is really important. And so, it's the same walk with God that we have. So it's our Bible time, and then also praying with them. So praying with them on a daily basis, praying with them at bedtime, asking them, is there anything you want to pray about, and teaching them what prayer is through that modeling.
Yeah, and one of the things that we've tried to do is to find teaching moments, in their lives, in our family, when things happen, like, hey, let's use this, and let's teach you, some kind of biblical principle out of this moment, and so that's kind of been really important for Susie and I, and we obviously bring our kids to church faithfully, don't depend on the church for their full spiritual health, but I believe it is a vital part of, because I know for me personally, and I know for Susie, and that upbringing makes a huge difference. And so, I think it's something that we, can take, actionable steps to really impart faith in our kids from, yes, bringing them to church, yes, praying with them, yes, you know what I mean? Like, all of these things can, really help instill faith. I'll give you one last thing that you want to say as far as imparting faith into our kids.
I think that that's great what he's talking about, of taking those teachable moments every day, and what she said about showing grace, and we talk about that so much going through the parenting book with on Consider It All Joy. Everything seems to come back to grace and how we respond, and if we're showing the way that the Father would respond to us, to our children, because that we are giving them the picture of what authority, what biblical authority looks like, with how we respond in their, misbehavior. And it's the same, it reflects so much on our relationship with Jesus, because that should be represented in how we're having a relationship with our kids. It's not easy. It's not easy, but I think it takes a lot of self-denial and discipline on our parts as a parent.
This has been so much fun having you two on the show, man. The time has just flown by, and so thank you so much for your wisdom and experience and talking about kids, because I believe that our greatest impact is going to be through our family.
Right.
That the greatest impact that we have, that I want it to be through, our family and through kids. And leading your kids is a vital job. It's one of the most important jobs that we have as parents, is leading our kids well.
Thanks for watching that episode. I want to remind you, go ahead, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and like us on Facebook. I also want to let you know that we have a Level Up Leadership Show private Facebook group. So if you go ahead and go into Facebook and just search Level Up Leadership Show, you'll find the group there, and we'd love for you to be a part of it. Why don't you go ahead, let me know, what really did you learn from this past episode? What are things that you like or didn't like? And then also, if there's some topic that you would love to see a show on, go ahead and let me know. All right, have a great week.